When Yellowstone erupts, we all lose. When I say we, I mean everyone on Earth. It doesn't matter if you're in California or New York, Tokyo or London, Cape Town or Paris, Sydney or Rome. Everyone will feel the effects of the super eruption. And it's not just because of the ash cloud that would block out the sun and plunge the planet into darkness for months. No, this is way worse than that. You see, Yellowstone sits right on top of the very center of a tectonic plate called the North American Plate. If Yellowstone were to erupt, its magma wouldn't just destroy everything around it. It would literally break apart the entire continent of North America. As the magma plume makes its way up through the lithosphere, it would carve out gigantic fissures. These cracks would stretch from Canada down into Mexico, and then spread out like a gigantic spider web. This process would start almost immediately after the initial explosion, and would continue for weeks, and as these cracks spread, they would open up more and more, reaching depths of hundreds of meters. This would happen because the magma plume generated by the eruption would melt away large portions of the continental crust. In fact, so much of the North American landmass would be destroyed that it would permanently reshape the continent. The Atlantic coast would no longer be the same, and neither would the Pacific coast. And yes, while North America would obviously be devastated by the reshaping of its land, this destruction would also reach far beyond our borders. You see, the magma plume would not only melt rock within the lithosphere, it would also melt rock deep within the mantle. This would weaken the mantle, causing huge chunks of it to sink into the Earth's core. As these chunks fall, they would trigger earthquakes around the world. Some of these quakes would be so strong that they would cause tsunamis, so as the earthquakes shake the world and tsunamis crash into coastal cities, there will be chaos everywhere. But what about life itself? Would life on Earth really end? Well, no, not immediately at least, but things would get pretty rough for a while. For example, according to some estimates, as many as 90% of people could be killed during the initial explosion. Then there's the small matter of the global nuclear winter that would follow. Here's how it would go down. Hot ash and gas would shoot 20 kilometers into the atmosphere during the eruption. That ash would spread around the globe within weeks, blocking sunlight and killing off most of the crops. Also, a series of powerful volcanic winter would likely follow this nuclear winter. These volcanic winters would occur as vast amounts of sulfur dioxide gas are released into the atmosphere. And instead of carbon dioxide, which would warm the Earth, sulfur dioxide forms sulfuric acid, which cools the Earth. So when we say that there would be a global catastrophe, we're not exaggerating. In fact, a new ice age could begin. Now, I know what you're thinking. The Earth has gone through volcanic winters before and life still exists. What makes this any different? Good question. You see, while our planet has indeed experienced volcanic winters in the past, none of them have been this intense. Back in 1815, Mount Tambora erupted in Indonesia. This was the largest volcanic eruption of the last 300 years, and it caused temperatures around the world to drop by an average of 1.2 degrees Celsius. The year without summer followed, and food shortages and disease killed an estimated 100,000 people. But there wasn't a global catastrophe. Why is this any different? It comes down to scale. While Tambora was massive, Yellowstone would be thousands of times larger. The amount of sulfur dioxide released into the air would be between 1,000 and 10,000 times greater than that of Tambora. And remember, Yellowstone is sitting right underneath the North American landmass, a landmass that contains a whopping 570 million people. So basically, a Yellowstone super eruption would make the year without a summer look like a walk in the park. Okay, so let's assume that you managed to survive the initial blast, the earthquakes, the tsunamis, and the following volcanic winters. Could you still die? Yeah, probably. You see, the Yellowstone Supervolcano is located in what is known as the Rocky Mountains seismic belt. This belt stretches from British Columbia down into New Mexico, and it's one of the most seismically active areas on Earth. Right now there are roughly 3,000 earthquakes here every year, but they are fairly small. However, after a Yellowstone super eruption, things would change. You see, the weakened crust would begin to slump. It would collapse into the giant magma chamber that lies beneath it. And this slumping would trigger even more earthquakes. And these quakes would be much bigger than the ones that occurred during the initial eruption. They could register between 7 and 9 on the Richter scale, and they would ravage the entire western half of North America. The strongest quakes would occur over a time frame of about 1 to 2 weeks, and these would be followed by smaller quakes that would continue for months or even years. Now, keep in mind, even though the quake itself would only last for seconds, it would be incredibly powerful. Take the 2011 Tohoku earthquake in Japan, for example. It registered an incredible 9.0 on the Richter scale. It struck less developed countries. Had the same quake hit, let's say, California, it could have killed as many as 700,000 people. And that was just a 9.0 quake. The 9.2 or higher quakes that would hit the western half of North America after a Yellowstone supereruption would be devastating. Not only would buildings and bridges collapse, but entire cities could vanish off the face of the earth. Even if you avoided all of this, you still run the risk of being buried alive by mud. After the earthquakes, the sloshing of the magma chamber would cause parts of the North American plate to rise up and other parts to fall down. The result would be massive landslides and mudslides. You've probably seen this phenomenon before, except it's usually much smaller in size and it's called debris flow. Debris flows can travel up to 160 kilometers per hour, and they can bury anything in their path. They can even travel onto the flat plains east of the Rocky Mountains. There, they would be traveling for dozens of miles. Entire villages and towns could be wiped out in a matter of minutes. To make matters worse, those who survived would face a future filled with disease. You see, while the Yellowstone Supervolcano would be busy carving apart the North American plate, it would also be releasing dangerous gases into the atmosphere. The main culprits would be carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, and sulfur dioxide. Carbon monoxide is especially deadly. It can kill humans and animals very quickly. Large animals such as bison, bears, and wolves would probably die within hours, while smaller animals would die within days or weeks. Humans would suffer as well, with those at lower elevations dying first. Those who live at higher elevations would probably survive, provided that they had food, water, and shelter. Unfortunately, the same could not be said for the survivors who lived in the eastern part of the North American continent. You see, the ash cloud would blanket the eastern half of the United States and much of Canada. It would be so thick that it could reach a depth of 20 centimeters, and the ash would contain small crystals of sulfuric acid. Over time, these crystals would melt, and they would flow into local water sources. Rivers, lakes, and groundwater would become acidic and undrinkable. The survivors in the east might be able to find uncontaminated water, but it would be hard to do so because of all the debris flows that would block mountain passes and valleys. Basically, once the initial dust settled, the eastern half of North America would look like a war zone. Trees would be dead, farmland would be buried, and entire cities would be uninhabitable. So when Yellowstone erupts, we all lose, whether we're in the blast radius or halfway across the world. Of course, if you're watching this video, you probably live in a relatively safe area. Chances are Yellowstone won't have a major impact on your daily life. We should probably mention, however, that it is overdue for a super eruption. Its last major blow happened 640,000 years ago. But you don't need to worry too much. Scientists monitor the park closely, and they haven't noticed any signs of an impending eruption. Still, when it happens, we'll all wish we had listened to the science.